Have you ever wondered whether medieval people truly chose where they traveled? It seems like. It's an obvious question. A traveler decides on a destination, follows a road, and eventually arrives. From a modern perspective, movement feels like a matter of personal choice. But inside the forests of medieval Europe, that assumption could not have been further from reality. Long before travelers decided where they wanted to go, the forest had already decided where they were allowed to walk. A merchant carrying valuable goods, a messenger racing toward a distant castle, a monk journeying between monasteries, or a family searching for a new village, all faced exactly the same invisible authority. None of them negotiated with kings before beginning their journey. None of them argued with local lords. Instead, every decision they made was quietly controlled by something far older and far more powerful: the landscape itself. Dense woodland, marshes, rivers, rocky hills, tangled undergrowth, fallen trees, seasonal floods, and changing weather combined
into an enormous natural system that silently dictated every step. In medieval Europe, freedom of movement was often
an illusion. People believed they were traveling through the forest. In reality, the forest was guiding them. The road you followed yesterday might disappear after weeks of rain. A shallow stream could become an uncrossable barrier. A shortcut might vanish beneath fallen trees after a violent storm. Even experienced travelers who had walked the same route for decades could suddenly discover that nature had rewritten the landscape. Unlike modern highways, medieval roads possessed almost no authority over nature. Nature always possessed authority over them. This relationship shaped almost every journey made across Europe for centuries. Travel was rarely about finding the fastest route. Instead, it was about discovering the few routes that the forest temporarily allowed people to use. Every successful journey represented a negotiation with the natural world. This is one of the greatest misconceptions about medieval Europe. When we imagine medieval travel today, we often picture determined merchants confidently riding toward distant cities, fearless knights crossing kingdoms, or adventurous pilgrims marching across vast landscapes. Yet historical reality was much quieter. Most travelers moved slowly, most remained cautious. Most spent every hour reading the landscape around them. They watched clouds gathering above the trees. They listened for rising water after heavy rain. They examined the condition of the ground beneath every step. They noticed broken branches, shifting mud, exposed roots, changing animal paths, and fresh signs left by earlier travelers. The forest constantly communicated with those willing to observe it. Ignoring those messages could be fatal. A single wrong decision rarely looked dangerous at first. Walking slightly away from the established road might save only a few minutes. Crossing a stream at an unfamiliar location could appear harmless. Attempting to climb a steeper hillside instead of following a longer road might seem efficient. Yet these small decisions often placed travelers inside terrain they no longer understood. Once the familiar road disappeared behind them, the
forest rapidly became confusing. Dense vegetation blocked distant landmarks. The canopy concealed the position of the forest.
Sound echoed unpredictably between trees. Similar-looking woodland repeated itself in every direction. Without realizing it, people could begin walking in circles. Unlike open countryside, forests rarely offered long views. A traveler often saw only a short distance ahead, before another wall of trunks, branches, and undergrowth interrupted every line of sight. The road became far more than a path. It became orientation itself. Remaining on the road meant remaining connected to everyone who had passed before. Leaving it meant abandoning centuries of accumulated experience. Even animals quietly influenced human movement. Wild boar created churned ground that became difficult for wagons. Beavers flooded valleys by damming streams. Large herds of deer established crossings that sometimes revealed safer passages through dense woodland. Meanwhile, predators encouraged travelers to remain together, whenever possible, especially during the darker months of the year. The forest never stopped changing. Spring transformed frozen roads into deep mud. Summer encouraged rapid vegetation growth that narrowed woodland paths. Autumn covered dangerous routes beneath thick carpets of leaves. Winter concealed streams, marshes, and uneven ground beneath snow and ice. Every season created an entirely different landscape. The same journey made in July could become almost impossible in February. This constant change explains why medieval travelers depended so heavily upon local knowledge. Maps existed, but they could never describe every fallen tree, every flooded crossing, every unstable hillside, or every seasonal obstacle waiting beneath the canopy. Only people who lived with the forest understood its changing personality. Villagers, woodcutters, charcoal burners, hunters, monks, and experienced merchants carried knowledge that no parchment could preserve. They remembered which stream flooded first, which valley remained dry after heavy rain, which hillside stayed frozen longest, which crossings became dangerous during spring thaw. This knowledge traveled from generation to generation long before it appeared in written records. In many ways, the forest possessed its own memory. It rewarded patience. It punished overconfidence. It ignored human ambition. No matter how wealthy a merchant became, no amount of money could persuade a flooded river to become shallow. No noble title could force a marsh to become solid ground. No military power could convince an ancient forest to reveal an easier route. Nature remained completely indifferent. Perhaps this is why medieval journeys often appear surprisingly slow to modern readers. Distance alone did not determine travel time. Conditions determined everything. A road that seemed reliable yesterday might require an entire day's detour tomorrow. Unexpected weather could delay travelers for days. Heavy wagons sometimes waited until roads dried before continuing. Entire caravans occasionally remained near villages simply because the surrounding landscape had become temporarily impassable. Waiting was not weakness. Waiting was survival. Over centuries, these realities shaped medieval society itself. Markets developed where reliable routes crossed. Villages appeared beside dependable river crossings. Monasteries welcomed exhausted travelers arriving from dangerous forests. Roads survived only where nature permitted them to survive. Everything else slowly disappeared beneath trees, moss, and silence. This is perhaps the most remarkable lesson hidden inside Europe's medieval forests. Human civilization did not spread by conquering every landscape. More often, it expanded by carefully adapting to landscapes that could never truly be conquered. The forest allowed movement only through narrow opportunities. People learned to recognize them. Generation after generation, they accepted the rules imposed by the wilderness instead of attempting to replace them. And perhaps that quiet partnership between humanity and nature explains why so many ancient woodland roads continued surviving for hundreds of years. Not because people defeated the forest, but because they have learned to respect it. Yet roads were only one part of medieval survival. Once the sun disappeared behind the trees, an entirely different danger emerged. The same forests that controlled movement during daylight became medieval night itself, exploring why darkness transformed familiar forests into places that even experienced travelers feared to cross. Because in medieval Europe, surviving the journey was only half the challenge. Surviving the night was another story entirely. Surviving the night was another story entirely.